Welcome back. So far, we've learned about comparison and logical operators, which help us evaluate conditions. In this lesson, we'll explore how Python makes decisions using conditional statements. Just like driving on a road, when you approach a traffic light, if the green light is on, you go. If it's red light, you stop. This decision-making process is exactly what conditional statements do in Python. They evaluate conditions and they decide what action to take with respect to the result of the condition. Conditional statements allow your program to execute specific blocks of code based on whether a condition is true or false. The most basic form of a conditional statement in Python is the if statement. We have the syntax of an if statement. When writing a conditional statement, you have the if keyword followed by the condition. Then after the condition, you have a block of code. So this block of code will be executed if the condition is true. But if the condition is not true, that block of code will be skipped. Let's have a practical example. Let's say we have a variable with the name of temperature. Right, so let's say the value of temperature is, let's say 20 degrees C. Let's say 20. Now we want to execute certain block of code if the temperature is greater than 15 degrees C. So to write a conditional statement, you start with the if keyword, then followed by the condition. The condition that we want to provide is if temperature is greater than 15. Okay, so we have colon. Then after that, we are going to write the code that we want to execute if the condition is true. So the code we want to execute is a simple print statement. And then we are going to say it's a warm day. All right. So outside of the conditional statement, then we can we can print, we can say the rest of the code. Okay. So now we have a conditional statement. This is the condition. If this condition is true, this block of code that is inside the conditional statement will be executed. If the condition is false, this line of code will be skipped and then the program will continue to run. Okay, so let's run this now. We have temperature to be 20. Then we are saying if temperature is greater than 15. So ordinarily, this condition is true because temperature is 20. And the condition is if temperature is greater than 15. So this condition is true. That means this line of code will be executed. Let's run this now and see what we have. Okay, so you can see we have it's a warm day printed in our console. Now let's say temperature is now 12. Okay, let's say it's 12, not 23. Let's say temperature is 12. Now let's run this code and see what we have. You can see now that this line is not printed in our console. This is because the condition is now false. So this block of code inside of the conditional statement will not be executed. Now in this example, we have just one line of code to be executed in the if block, which is not always the case. We can have multiple lines of code to be executed in an if statement. In fact, we can have thousands of lines of code to be executed in an if statement. So we can add more lines of code. We can print another line. We can say, okay, it's a warm day. So wear light clothing, right? Okay. We can have another line. We can also print another statement. We can say stay hydrated. All right. So this is just to signify that you can have multiple lines of code to be executed in an if statement. If we run this now, you can see that none of the lines of code was executed because the condition is currently false. Okay, so now let's say we have temperature to be 25. Okay, if we run this now, you're going to see that we have the lines of code executed because the condition is now true. Because temperature is 25 and 25 is greater than 15. So to create a conditional statement, you use the if keyword followed by the condition, and then you have the block of code to be executed if the condition is true. If you notice how I wrote the code, the block of code to be executed by the conditional statements have some spaces before them. As you can see, we have some spaces here. They are not written on the same line with the if statement. And you might be wondering, why is that? The reason for that is because Python uses indentation to define blocks of code. Indentation is simply the spaces or tabs at the beginning of a line. Every line of code inside the if block must be indented at the same level, just as you have seen in this example. Forgetting to indent the block of code to be executed inside of the if block will cause an error. For example, let's get rid of the indentation before these lines. Okay, so as you can see, we already have error. So if I get rid of this, you can see now that we have error. If we run this now, we are going to run into indentation error because Python is expecting indents for the lines of code to be executed inside of the if block. And since it cannot find any indentation, so that's why we run into indentation error. So you always take note that the lines of code to be executed by a conditional statement, if the condition is true, must be indented inside of the conditional statement. If I run this now, this is going to run and then these lines of code will be printed. But if the condition is now false, let's change this to, let's say, 10. Okay. So now you will see that these two lines of code will not be printed. This is because they are the ones that are indented inside of the if block. So that means they are the one that belongs to the conditional statement. This one is no longer part of the conditional statement because it is not indented inside of the if block. So it is not covered by the conditional statement. Now, if I indent it inside of the conditional statement, then it's going to be covered. So you can see now that it is no longer printed because the condition is not true. So if the condition is now true, then all of them will be printed. There are some best practices to follow when creating your indentation. The first is you should use 4 spaces, which is the recommended method by Python, or you can use a single tab. By pressing a single tab on your keyboard, it's going to automatically create 4 spaces for you. This has been configured by most of the popular IDEs like PyCharm, like VS Code. If you press tab once, it's going to create 4 spaces for you. So that's how you create your indentation. So either you use tab or you use 4 spaces. Be consistent throughout your code. If you go with tab, use tab all through. If you go with spaces, use spaces all through. Just that the good news is most of the modern code editors has solved this problem. If you press your tab once, your code editor will convert it to 4 spaces. So you are most likely to have 4 spaces in your code. You are not likely to have tab. As you can see, I used tab in this code now, but if you go back, you will see that I have 4 spaces. That is the configuration of the modern IDs that we have all around. So it doesn't matter which one you use, either space or tab. You are definitely going to arrive at the same result. Now, as a practical example, we can improve on our previous examples by using conditional statements. In our vote eligibility checker, rather than just printing true or false, we can print a more reasonable statement. So if you can remember, we implemented vote eligibility checker in one of our previous lessons where we printed are you eligible to vote? Okay, so it's a question, and then we ask for the age of the user. So we are going to say input. Okay, so we can say enter your age. So we are going to put that in an int function so that it's going to convert the result of the input to an integer. Okay, now other than just printing either true or false, we are going to use conditional statements to check if the user is older than 18 years of age. Then we are going to print a more reasonable statement than true or false. So we are going to say if age is greater than or equal to 18. Okay, so we are going to have, so inside of this, we are going to print, we can have a new line syntax. So we can say, okay, now let's run this. What do we have? We have, are you eligible to vote? Enter your age. Let's say I'm 16. Okay, so I will enter that. Okay, so as you can see, nothing is printed because this condition is not true. So let's run it again now and make the condition true. So let's say I'm 19. So you can see here you are eligible to vote because this condition is not true. This is how we use conditional statements in the real world. There are several other areas where conditional statements can be used. In fact, conditional statements are used virtually in all aspects of programming to create programs that respond to different kinds of situations. In our next lesson, I have a little challenge for you. We are going to implement a user login system using what you have learned so far. See you there.